Hi, everybody. Welcome to Soul Code. So I am Andra Annette, and this is my co-host, Lorilet Monegro. Please help me welcome Lorilet. Hi, sweetie. How are you?
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much, Andra. I'm really excited to be here today and, so grateful for us to be able to work together in this project.
I think that we are meant to do this together. So you're a speech pathologist, and I'm a nurse by profession. And the natural holistics and all the other stuff, the holistic practitioner. But you help people with communication, and so much of what we do in this world is communication. So I think this is an integral part of health, and as someone who's worked in health 40 years now, I've been accustomed to reading the nonverbal, and I'm sure you understand what I mean by that when people are saying one thing and their body is saying something so different. So, what is that
Yes.
like for you when someone's saying that they can't do something, or they don't have a problem, and you know that they have that problem
Yeah,
because
thank you
their
so much for
body's
that.
saying it?
Thank you so much for that. Actually, I think that one of the key issues is that for us, the average person that does not have a communication issue, right, may really not have the waiting time and patience around reading people for their nonverbal language. But meanwhile, nonverbal language comprises such a powerful part of the messages that we really create in the world. And I think that, having this conversation about how do we really learn to read people, but also uh, connect with them in that process. When we really connect with people, words can be uh, an excess at that point. When we really connect with people is not necessarily through words. Those are just like the icing on top. So I think it's really important for us to become attuned to that, to pay more attention around our environment. Um, and I mean, I know that you as a nurse also can attest to the importance of this nonverbal communication and connecting with your patients.
Well, I think that regardless of whether it's a patient or just someone we meet in day to day, their body sends other messages. So if we're sitting with someone and we may feel very comfortable, but they have their arms across their body, they're very guarded. So when we see them do this, we know that something they've said might make us uncomfortable, or some, so we kind of feed into that almost
Mhm.
instantaneously, because we see that the messages are withdrawn and saying something different than they are. So we kind of know how to respond to that, or maybe we back up and give them that room to make them feel that comfortable, and see those arms come undone so they do feel like we're not a threat, because that's really saying that they're threatened and they don't feel comfortable, they're guarded. And when we can start tuning in to other people's responses, I think that it makes the communication more effective. And I think there's a stronger connection, because you are giving people that space, that value. So some people, I don't know if you've ever experienced someone who's a close talker, but I've experienced people that come right up to you and they're like this, and it makes anybody uncomfortable because they're violating of your personal boundaries and your
Mhm.
space. So
Mhm.
I think when we're communicating with people, sometimes it's very natural to hide behind those boundaries, not realizing that the body is saying what they really mean. Would you agree?
Well, interestingly enough, in my work with children who have speech and language delays or issues in general, just disordered if they're older, and so it's no longer a delay at that point, um, I have noticed that very well. I notice it every day. However, I also know that when they are close to you, they may or may not necessarily always be aware of those conventions that we've created around what is appropriate or not appropriate. And not that they're trying to violate anything. It's more us to be able to guide them into what we individually are able to also engage in. There are some interactions that would be deemed inappropriate if someone gets so close to you that then it could also be misinterpreted, and also then the other individual doesn't know. But more than anything is being empathetic with the person, and instead of focusing on that aspect, what I tend to do is figure out what is it that they are trying to tell me they need. Most of the time, when a child comes to me and they are lacking the oral language to say exactly what they want to say, they will resort to these types of gestures or pointing or get close to you. And as a person, you may be a little bit like, oh, okay, what's going on? For me, I'm used to it already. So I'm not it doesn't bother me. I'm not upset. It's fine. Um, and I take each opportunity that I can for them to also learn to navigate that. So if they come too close to me, I let them know, hey, by the way, when we're talking to people, maybe you tap on their shoulders before you get in front of their face. It's okay. You did it with me. But, if you see other people that don't know you, they may not take that well. And so it's becomes an opportunity for them to not feel upset about the fact that they did it, but then to be able to then say, oh, maybe next time I don't do that. Um, for us, we need to start holding space for this. We need to stop also censoring the children that they don't know.
Especially when we're working with children. So I like what you said. I mean, because I work with children, you know that I do a lot of community work with children. And when I'm relating to children and when I'm relating to adults, it's very different because we do tend to expect more from adults that they would have learned that somewhere along the way. But I like that you help them navigate, that you take the time to help them navigate and without diminishing what they're saying or doing, because I think that a lot of people um, create problems in people by pointing fingers of this is bad behavior or this is acceptable, and really putting things into categories like this is good, this is bad, this is not acceptable, this is acceptable, because it kind of tells people what the norm is, and there really is no norm because we're all different, but it makes people feel like they have to stay within those boundaries and that they can't express freely. And a big part of communication is allowing people to express themselves in a way that feels good for them and comfortable so that they can share, innately what they feel, right? Without
Yeah.
being halted.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, I think that the reason why many children, even children who are minimally verbal or nonverbal, I'm going to say for the most part, tend to do well in their interactions with me is because there is a very implicit, at a nonverbal level, well understood acceptance of who they are. I find that unfortunately, a lot of the judgment from our society in general interactions with individuals who may not have the background knowledge and understanding that I have, right? Because I want to make sure that's also clear. As a speech language pathologist, we get to read so many different kinds of things on how to support an individual who is having difficulty with their communication. So I have that advantage. But outside of that, I'm talking on the premise of the humanistic aspect of just being. When the child, even a very impaired individual, is in front of me, I don't look at their impairment. I'm focused on the whole person in front of me. I kind of blur, for whatever reason. I am sharing a very deep and personal thought process within me. Okay. I don't see those limitations in front of me. Like my mind understands, yeah, this person has this limitation, that diagnosis, whatever. I understand it all, yes. But past that, I'm very interested in seeing the human person, the inside, who is there beyond all of whatever limitations anybody else has said exist. And I think in that process of having valued that child in front of me, something starts happening immediately. It's almost like an immediate agreement of sorts. You see me, I see you, meaning that child understands I see them.
They
And
feel understood.
yeah, it's like a filter that they have. It's a very interesting thing, but I would urge people to try that, to try looking beyond people's limitations that have been basically used to keep people down or to shame them. If a child does not know what our external agreements are about being closed, then whose responsibility is it to guide them in that understanding? It's ours, because obviously if he knew it, he wouldn't do it. That child would not go ahead and do something if they really have understood. I want to be clear with what I'm saying. I'm not talking about, hey, he has a cognitive impairment, he didn't understand. No, I'm talking about, even with the cognitive impairment, they reach the point of understanding the agreement and then they don't do it, even with the cognitive impairment.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying. But I think that people tend to put people in a box, even with cognitive impairments, because you know that I do work with children with different
Mhm.
types of cognitive impairment. And I remember them telling me that a child was nonverbal. And I knew he wasn't, because I did see him, and I saw his behaviors, and I saw his surroundings, and he had such little control over everything that was going on in his life that he had decided to use mutism to control what he couldn't control in the other areas of his life. And that when he
Absolutely.
felt comfortable enough, that he started talking, and talking really well. And they told
Of
me,
course.
"What are you talking about? He doesn't talk." I said, "Sure he does." And I called him by name, and I asked him the moral of the story, and he matter of factly said it. And I was like, "Tell me again, he doesn't talk?" So, but I believed in him, and he knew that, and he
Right.
trusted me. But I earned that trust with him. And people have to understand that when there's cognitive impairment, you do need to earn their trust. People,
Right.
and by you saying that they understand, in my line of work, if someone comes in and they're dying and they need that help now, they don't really need that time to bond with me. They're just hoping I'm really good at my job. And later we do develop, that understanding, because you walk them through the rest of the process, right? But because of that, I want to ask you how you feel that plays in the online space, because here for us, we do need to earn that trust in a different way.
Yes.
you're exceptional at what you do, and I know that I'm exceptional at what I do. So, um, you know, we can't just come out here and say, hey, by the way, I'm really great
Right.
at this, because it's the kind of work we do that we do need to let people know that, we are who we say we are. We are going to walk you through this, and you need to feel safe. So a
Right.
lot of people online will tell someone to play to people's pain. That's how they sell what to new coaches and stuff like that.
Right.
And they tell you to play to their pain so that they feel like you identify with them. And that goes against everything
Right. The
that
ethics.
we
The
are, or we,
ethics.
yes, and
The
that
ethics.
and the people that we are morally, right? So
Right. But also the ethics of what exactly is it that we are setting out to do. And this is one of the issues why for me, when people are like, okay, well, can you just put an offer out there, whatever, I'm like, well, it's not about just put an offer. You want to be able to provide a value that if you're going to guide a person or a group of people, that you are able to do so in the best way possible. So even if I were to take on a client online, I have to have a call. I have to kind of talk to you. I need to know, where are you in this process, and what is it that exactly I can do for you given your circumstances. You know, it's not like yeah, just one works for everybody. No, unfortunately, not everything works for everybody. And sometimes we will make an offering of a product or a type of activity or something that could help someone depending on where they are in that path or not. That can be a hit or miss. But what is not a hit or miss is when you're offering these programs, it shouldn't be about just speaking to someone's pain and all that, because we're not selling um, a thing that is like an object.
we're not
This,
selling products. And I like that you
right,
said that. We're not selling products. And I help people with weight loss online, and thyroid and gut health. And a lot of people are selling that diet for everybody. And I'm always going to be that nurse at heart, because when you spoke about looking at the child, we nurse like, as a nurse, I nurse the whole family. And that's what my life has been for the last 40 years. And I've been repairing the body, like helping people get back to a state of health. I didn't say, okay, I'm just going to do this piece over here and hope your hypertension is okay. And oops, wait a minute.
yeah,
Oh, did you say you also had kidney disease? Maybe we'll try this. We can't do that. So when I meet with clients, uh, I can't just, I mean, I can give them an offer that I'm going to get them A, B, and C, and D, because I know that what I'm capable of. But I do have to meet with that client. I do a head to toe assessment. I need to know what's in your history, what those potential outcomes are, and, to avoid getting to those places, right?
right, absolutely,
What medications are you on? Are they going to interact with the diet or the recommendations I make you? Because, even holistic medications or in foods can interact with certain medications. I
right,
mean, if you're on Lipitor, you're not going to be eating grapefruit every day. So there's a lot of things that a lot of people out there really don't know, because they don't have those degrees and they haven't studied, pharmacology and all that stuff, and they really don't know. And
that's true.
potentially they're more dangerous. They can cause more harm than good. So I appreciate that you spoke to that, and that this is not a one shop wonder. And I think that the purpose of helping people is that a lot of times it's something that we've gotten through in our own lives, right? So
Yes.
you were not English speaking at first, correct?
Yes, absolutely not. I wasn't even born in the US. I was born in the Dominican Republic. And just even the process of learning the English language was a process in itself, literally, because I came to this country and while I was almost 9 years old, you know, I still had to adjust to everything here. And it was hard for a few years, when you consider the process of language learning. Yeah, you can have your basic little words and, hi and bye and basic communication in the first 2 years. But when you talk about cognitively, academically, knowing the English language, that takes 7 years, about 7 years to really be more on the solid end of that. And that continues all throughout as you continue to build your vocabulary, your repertoire of knowledge, right? And gather your understanding through the books that you read and the writing that you do, and you keep building it up. And so there's no quick uh knowing something, which is why even in the US, right? You don't go testing the kid in first grade. They get tested in third grade. By that time, you should have had a few years into your schooling, and know the basics, the foundations of your reading and writing and all of that. It takes a few years for those things to be in place.
To
So it was a
develop,
hard thing.
to
Yeah, it was a
yes,
hard process. And that
well,
doesn't even include the cultural piece, because that's just like talking just simply one little small
mhm.
section. But in the US, I'm going to say in the US, we have an extremely high value to language and communication. And like, this is number one in this country. You have an accent or you have you take your time speaking. I don't know. People start judging your intelligence. All of a sudden they say, "Oh, you're dumb," or something else. They don't even let you
Process what they
process
said.
the information. Yes, it's like boom, 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 kind of go, go, go. And so it's just an interesting thing, as I have over the years sat back to also process everything about, wow, that's different from what I did. It's a really eye opener for someone who is not a native.
But I think that them not giving time, and because even time varies amongst cultures, and a lot of
Yeah,
people don't realize that, like in some cultures they are frequently late because they don't hold such a high value on time, where if you're 15 or 20 minutes late for an appointment, that's their norm. So um yeah, so culture and value definitely plays a big impact on everything. But I think that as a culture here in America, we are not as laid back
agree.
as we once were. I think that in an attempt to grow, that maybe we've exceeded our capacity to learn in a lot of ways, because we're always on the next fix and always on the next fix, and we never take time to actually be where we are in those moments and do that learning then. And I think for someone with a cognitive issue, that they may not be giving that child the time to process that information, because they do process it different, you know and even within those cognitive issues, there's also people have different ways of dealing with spatial differences, how they evaluate things, whether they're a visual person, so their learning ability and how they learn all comes into that. Some people are visual, some people are auditory, some people are a mixture of both. So you have to let people really process that. But you do have to be willing to reflect on what these people are saying, and
Yes.
ask them, so this is what I thought I heard you say. Did you mean? Or because that's where I think a lot of communication gets lost today, people assume they understood what you said, but what you said really wasn't what they heard or what you meant. And then there's a real lack of understanding that. So I think as a culture, we need to be able to have better communication. Uh, Certainly in health, that's a major aspect of health. We do have to be culturally competent, and we do have to be aware of those cultural differences. And we do study the cultures. That's part of that learning.
Yes, yes. One of the things that, I think makes it interesting is to be able to hold that space from judgment when we're dealing with someone who is from a different place or has a different way of practicing something. Um, it's can be hard to do when we're set in our ways. But if we start kind of thinking more of a global scale as opposed to thinking in a bubble, right? If we stay in a bubble, then it's very hard for us to consider the other, right? The
Yes,
foreigner. But if we decide to realize, wait a minute, outside of us, there are so many other countries and other ways of doing something that we may then expand our worldview and not be so enclosed into our ways. But I think it's a challenge when, we're not necessarily taught that that's an added value. We can be nationalists, we can be patriotic without having to put other people to shame. Like that doesn't help us be the true leader. America, if we look over the years, has evolved in those principles, and it's interesting because you find that people do discriminate a lot around
I
people with
see. I see it a
disabilities,
lot.
with people with disabilities, for
Not
example, in
just
this case.
disabilities, not just with
I,
disabilities,
but I'm
certainly
saying,
with disabilities.
right, in
But I
this
think,
case, I'm saying, I'm referring right now to what we're talking about, communication delays, and there are many types of discriminatory actions. But in that particular bubble, most things aren't built with that consciousness in mind that there are individuals with disabilities around.
but I think the real problem lies in that there is a lot of discrimination, and we've gotten to a place in the world where people think anything that's not just like them is labeled different, because rather than them accept that we're all different, they choose to look at the difference instead of the similarities, right?
Right.
So that is, and we can't say that we're going to evolve and stay in that same place. So we do, it's not, everybody is different in this world, and nobody has the
Mhm.
same thumbprint as I do. It's just a fact, right?
Right.
So we have to be able to be open and to be able to allow people to be themselves without reprimanding them for being different.
Themselves, right.
Yes, and if you don't, and that does, whether you have cognitive impairments, you're a
Or
child or
not.
you're an adult, we do have to learn to be more gentle with one another. We do need to give the same acceptance that we want from others. And
Hmm.
too often we want to be loved and valued and respected, but that's not the way we treat our fellow human beings, our friends, our family, right? So I remember when I was a kid, true story. My mother would be yelling at us on the phone. I mean, just yelling at us. And then she would pick up the phone and say, "Hello." And I'd say, "Who is
How do
she?
you do that?
Who is that woman?" But I was like, how did she turn that on and off like that? But to me, she didn't want to be seen as a person yelling at her children, but that's exactly who she was, and that was her right. They're your children; you could raise them however you want. But how quickly we hide because we're afraid to share ourselves honestly with people, because there is so much
Judgment out
judgment.
there.
And not it's not always necessarily discrimination, but I think that plays into it. I think what we're taught and what we hear from other people also plays into it. I think that whenever something is new, like a child with developmental delays or something like that, because someone doesn't understand it,
Right.
they will belittle it rather than take the time to understand it, because
Hmm.
they think that understanding is beneath them, because a lot of people have that concept, it can't happen to me, and it could be their child, but for the grace of God go I. So um I think we need to be more connected, not just in a verbal way, but less connected to the exterior things that are going on in the world and more connected to the internal, what we're putting out there, what we're taking in, because this does impact us in a health way.
It does. Absolutely. I think that, what you're saying makes perfect sense in terms of that detachment from others who are different. When people find themselves in a bubble of their success or their ability to not have to face these types of conditions, for example, that someone with a disability or someone who has suffered a stroke or has had a limitation, it's very easy to dismiss and be like, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for this. And the truth of the matter is we need to kind of stop and think and process how we're showing up and how we're supporting those around us that need us in different ways, because it is now starting to show up in different ways, such as with mental health issues, right? Sometimes these preoccupations and all these different kinds of things can lead to other breakdowns. And the fact that we also have a variety of ways that people can be uh, neurologically diverse, this idea that people who are on the spectrum have to be a certain way. Well, not really. I know some people who are on the spectrum and they don't necessarily look like any particular way. Not everybody is fanning their hands. Sometimes is a different way that the manifestation of who they are is, and sometimes is not necessarily something that you can see on the outside.
Sometimes it goes missed because you really
Yep,
can't tell until later on in life.
life, yes.
Yeah,
Or we may have
sometimes
tendencies. I must tell you, sometimes I say to myself, okay, do you have some tendencies? And that's okay. You understand? Like, I feel like maybe because I'm in the field, right? I have a different lens probably than someone who is not. I have to kind of put that out there. But I also feel that society needs to stop acting like it's not happening. Stop acting like individuals with different kinds of needs aren't here, and stop acting like we are going to have them adapt to us when we're the ones that need to open up and expand to not only accommodate but also support them so that we can elevate them too. Because
yes.
this idea that we're all this up on top and we come down on, no, we need to kind of realize, wait a minute, what legacy are you building here? Um, because we need to elevate them so that we can all elevate each other. Um,
Agreed. That's a
you
very
know,
important point, because they really do need that love and support. And this could be your family member, but the communities that we're building now, the way we teach our children is what we will see in our future world. So if it's not looking good, then we need to accept responsibility for that, because we're missing something. It's not them, it's us.
it's
So
us.
we do need to accept that responsibility, because if you look around at what's going on with kids today, and that detachment, and always in the phone and not having real relationships and very quick to violence and things like that. These are things that children are taught. They don't just pick it up
Mhm.
on the street one day. So either the environment that they're in is unhealthy, whether that be their friends, their family, whatever that is, but we need to learn to come back to that community raising that child, because we are
Yes.
all responsible for every child.
I talk about, having a village, enlisting your village. It's something that I've mentioned. It's so funny because I just had an interview with someone yesterday. It's probably going to come out within the week. I don't know when he will be publishing that. As part of his blog, he wanted to just have me there, his podcast rather. Anyways, and we were talking a little bit about this subject, the fact that, for whatever reason, kids now are on their phones and are in a bubble that is just scrolling, 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 but they're not connecting with anyone in a way that allows them to have relationships even in their own homes. They could be at home and everybody has their own little bubble, their own tablet. They could be one next to each other, like in the kitchen and in wherever, and they do not talk to each other. They will send a text. They will do anything but talk to each
It's
other. Whatever that is, I'll text you, I'll email you, I'll send you a note, whatever, but whatever that is, it's for sure is not, hey, mom, or hey, so and so, like a conversation and an acknowledgement that you are present, that you are there. There is none of that. Or let's sit down and have a tea or have hot chocolate or let's just talk. No, they go out to dinner. It's the same thing. They're on their phones. Everybody's texting. It's like these phones have power in them and they create addictive behaviors. And addiction is addiction, whether it's addiction to food, whether it's addiction to drugs, whether it's addiction to the phone. I'm going to say there's an addiction center and a response because it creates this type of release of certain energies. And so whoever is behind all of the social media, all of this, all of these companies, the conglomerate, they know what they are doing. And that rewires our brain. It rewires our brain, but
it
not in a
absolutely
positive way.
does. It's
Not in a
making
positive
us
way.
it makes us dumber by the second. But
Right.
the piece that I'm concerned with the phones and that lack of connection is because
It's huge.
the basic need is to feel love and belonging. And if you're not connected, you're not feeling that. So that is going to have an impact on your relationships,
Yep.
trust, bonding with people in the future, and your self-esteem, because especially
Absolutely. I
if
talk
it's some
about all these things. So funny.
especially
Yes.
but especially in the home, if you're not feeling that attachment in the home, it is going to have an impact on your self-esteem. Well, why don't they want to spend time with me? Aren't I good enough? And that does create these animosities as children age and they don't know how to develop that, that ability to share that, because
Hmm.
they didn't share at home.
Hmm.
I was on a show and I told a woman that um, what happens in my house stayed in my house. So for me, as I got older, I just really didn't share a lot of stuff because that wasn't how I raised. It was like everything was mum's the word, right? So it made it harder for me to share. We weren't like that huggy family. So when people hugged me, I was like, whoa, what's this? Okay, this isn't too bad. All right, I could do this.
I can tolerate it.
I don't know for how long though. So, but it's an acquired, so you have to take that risk, and move past that. But I think that we're stymieing a lot of these children today that we're really impacting their growth in a way. And if history teaches us anything, it does teach us that the nurture and the nature are equally important. There's no one is more
Better
important.
or worse, yeah.
They're both equally important.
Yes. And, to that point also, when I think about how do we shape our identity, right? Our identity of self, and how we then also create our understanding of uh, healthy attachment styles. Um, when we do not foster a healthy interaction and connection, we're for sure going to have children who are going to have issues in that whole area, not only with self-worth, not only with self-esteem, not only with relating to other people and their own understanding of who they are and in relationship to others. They just don't know how to navigate that world. Even in speech therapy, we also have for children who may have these types of needs, what we call social groups, right? And part of what we do is kind of talk about all these soft skills and just understanding the value that they bring into our interactions. Because someone who says please and thank you and acknowledges you and hi, how are you today? And hey, I'm sorry I made you feel that way. People who understand how to use these in social interactions are better able to navigate the world successfully, even when they're having a
Agreed.
conflict.
Agreed.
Even when they're having
Agreed.
a conflict. So we can start teaching all of these things explicitly, because I don't think it's going to work implicitly when our children are in bubbles scrolling on the media. The parents are detached and scrolling away as well, and everybody's scrolling in a labyrinth of like just almost like an alternate reality world, that then it's also shaped by these bursts of dopamine inducing feelings as you're scrolling away. They are perfectly timed. They kind of know they have algorithms to feed all that. They have all of that, but none of it is really supporting our mental health, our brain health. None of it is supporting our relationships. None of it is conducive to construction of the human being. You would have to directly be highly aware to go ahead and filter responsibly. One, that you won't consume violence that is not needed. Two, that you will go ahead and find productive ways to use the technology. Three, that you will find joy and excitement in a learning process that constructs you rather than entertains you. A lot of what's happening on social media is for entertainment purposes only. Kind of like when you go to the casino, you're on your own. And while you're at it, we're going to also make sure you open up your wallet, because
But
we
it
got to
is a
get paid.
crapshoot. It
We got
is
to
a
get paid. We're going to get paid and you're going to pay. So we don't see it, but it's pay to play. Basically, each time you go in there, you don't see it, but it's there. It's shaped in such a subtle way, but it's very deliberate, which is why even in the other show that I am hoping that at some point somebody who's um in the political realm that can shape legislation can look into how do you hold these companies accountable for what they're doing. They know what they're doing. And it's all for money. It's all for game. In the name of capitalism, they disguise all these evil things that are very destructive. None of it is constructive. None of it is. If it were, you know, then we would have different outcomes. We wouldn't have children that have access to all kinds of things, and we wouldn't have children that are feeling suicidal just of the things they're
I
being
just
fed.
think I think, okay, because I'm someone that's on social media, but I limit my time, and
Right.
I do, but
Use it consciously.
I don't think that there is anybody really, monitoring that screen time or anything like that. And I think it is killing brain cells momentarily, right? So I think that we as a community need to be more responsible. I know that legislation did come forward, but I'm not sure it was for the betterment of people as much as people are making money online, so there's nobody to fill those jobs.
Right,
So, you know, you have bad seeds in every aspect.
right,
So
right.
I think we've highlighted a lot of topics today. I think we're going to close out the show on this note, and I think we're going to try to help people be more communicative and start sharing and how to really not be so judgmental. So I think we will do well to talk about some of the experiences that we've had in our
Sure.
careers and how we found that communication really changed that. Because sometimes I think when someone has an example of what you're talking about, they can make that connection sometimes, you know? So
Yes.
certain situations, because I know you deal with it every day, even with family members, sometimes um even though there's a lot of family members that have these kids that may be considered at a disadvantage, the family members themselves haven't accepted them the way you need to work with them. So
Right.
that when you tell them something about their child, they might not respond well. And
That's
that's
right.
why we have to really know how to navigate, how to communicate to people, what's safe to say, and um, or how to say something effectively without worrying about the safety and in a polite, respectful way, because I think you can say anything you want to say, but you do have to be respectful. And I think a lot of people leave out that respect piece in communication.
Yeah, and I think it's because the disrespect comes from not honoring where the person is at. I think that when we don't honor where the person is at, we violate them. And so when that happens, that's a very difficult space from which to construct trust. I have had to deal with parents who are in pain emotionally because no one that I have ever met is glad to hear that their children have any kind of issues. No one that I have ever met so far. There is a pain and a sense of loss that comes with it, even though they have their physical child. But then there's a sense of loss of what it was that they had imagined in their brains that the future would look like. And then there are a bunch of unknowns that they don't know the answers to immediately after either getting a diagnosis or finding themselves in a situation that maybe their child was okay and then the 18-month mark hit and everything went downhill, or seeing that everything was fine and then they have some kind of regressive kind of component that kicks in and the kid is now 2 years old and like little by little things are just becoming strangely strange and now the kid becomes nonverbal, like, and you're like, whoa, what happened? And it's a sense of loss. They were like, but my kid was talking, my kid was asking me. So there's a real pain, a real raw pain of like, did something happen to my kid? And then they want to figure it out right away. Sometimes, I have to hold that space. And I also have the parents that come in, they bring the kid for an evaluation. But guess what? They're right away being very defensive and telling me that, my kid is pretty smart. They somehow want to make sure I know that the child is very smart and
Mhm.
that just because they're not talking, they kind of put it right in front. And I'm like, it's okay. I'm not judging their intelligence by whether they talk to me or don't talk to me. I'm here to understand what they need. What do they need so that we can get them to improve in the way that they're communicating? Um, but it's painful because they kind of put themselves in front. Others come in and they're like, well, my mom was taking care of them and she only speaks Spanish, and my kid was fine before. I think because they're talking to them in Spanish, my child is confused, and I'm like, okay, all right, that's what you believe is happening so far. And then I said, there's nothing else you need to tell me. You sure this is what you feel? I can find out more. I'll determine, based on what they can do, not do. I'll speak to them in Spanish, speak to them in English, see what's going on. And then I tell them, are you concerned with behavior? Are you concerned? Then we go point by point. But I have to acknowledge what they said. I can't go and negate that. I have to acknowledge that this is really their core belief.
Mm.
And when they see, oh, that I'm not fighting it, that I'm not discussing it, that I'm not trying to convince them, that I'm not trying to dismiss it, I'm not trying to do anything with what they tell me. I'm listening it. Then they realize, okay, she's not trying to do anything with me.
Mm.
Okay. And then they feel like, okay, she left me off the hook. And it's really more because I want them to settle down on that. I'm not there to judge them. And I tell them, look, I'm not interested in judging you, judging your parenting, judging what happened. I'm trying to understand what your child needs. And when I keep going back to what the child needs, then I tell them, tell me, what do you think your child needs? And then all of a sudden it starts flipping differently, because now I'm not making it about what did you do, what did you not do. It's not accusatory, it's not judgmental. It's more like, tell me really what has brought you here. What are your real deep concerns, without holding back. And then I tell them, because if you don't tell me, how are we going to unlock that door that you want to be able to enter into a space to get supports? If everything is perfect, how am I going to go and
Well,
ask
yeah.
anybody to open doors for you, for people who actually need it? They are waiting for the key that I have in my hand to give to you if you're the one that needs it. But if you don't need that key, it would be very unfair for you to take it from me, knowing that there's somebody right behind in the next, in the line. You can't do that. And then they realize, okay. And so then they start opening up. Talk to me about behavior, talk to me academics, talk to me about speaking, talk to me about what you're doing with them, talk to me about how they interact with others. And then it all starts opening up, because they realize, okay, it either is or it isn't. Either I do need help or I don't. Either everything is perfectly fine or no, things are crashed out of their mind. Either my kid is well or my kid really needs supports. Either I can wing it or I cannot wing it. Either I've been winging it, I can't take it anymore. And so sometimes what ends up happening after all of our conversation interaction is the real truth. So my recommendation is to be present and be really aware of what your child needs, and open up the path so that they get what they need.
I love that. I think it's very important for us all to be present. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think you bring a special light to your line of work. And I see your heart when you talk about what you do. You get very excited. You can't help because you just have so much compassion and so much love. And I think anybody that has your help, it is lucky to have that. I think you're an amazing asset. So we are going to wrap up this week's show, and we hope you'll tune in next week because we're going to get a little bit more into communication and really what we can do to change the dynamics of where communication really is in the world today. And we have a speech pathologist here with us that knows just what this communication is really meant to look like, and we're going to take some advice here because we do need to open those floodgates and start supporting each other and have some give and receive. So thanks for watching. This is Andra Annette and Lorilet Monegro, and please have a great night. Take care. Say
Thank you.
goodbye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.